Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review Halo, and this is the new Amazon series based off of the hit video game franchise that I suck at. Never been big into first-person shooters, except unless you count GoldenEye, and you gotta go way back to the N64 for that. But I remember the few times that I've actually tried to play Halo getting absolutely demolished by much more talented and experienced players. So I really don't have a whole lot of connection to this. All I know is whether it was Peter Jackson, Blomkamp, being involved in a Halo film, and that was going to be like the biggest thing. And then, oh my god, they announced Amazon was actually making a Halo series. And then you watch it and you're just like, is this just some random sci-fi movie from Sci-Fi? Because honestly, that's kind of what this show feels like. And that was pretty disappointing to me. You have all this like hype for a series, and like, even though I don't have a whole lot of connection to it, like, I appreciate the fact that like this is a really well-respected, beloved franchise, and it could offer up something interesting. And I guess a comparison was like, I'm a big fantasy fan seeing the film Aragon and being like, this just feels like some rando fantasy movie, and kind of lacking the spirit and the personality of the actual work that was adapted. And, I watched this, and to me, during the action sequences, which I think when I first watched the first episode, I'm like, oh, this looks cheap and cheesy. As the series went on, especially in the climax of like the last episode, I'm like, this action has like a very specific look to it. I'm not gonna lie, kind of into it. And that's the thing. The action in this series, I think, works. And that's where its personality comes through. And I think it does a really awesome job of capturing this experience. And, it cuts into the first-person shooter. It has, like, the specific aliens and creatures from what you expect in the games, and you see the weapons and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, I can appreciate this. I'm having some fun with this. But there's such little action in this series. There's so much talking and build-up and exposition and just dumping of information throughout this, 9 episodes, and I'm just like, you make a Halo series and this is what you do? I'm assuming the games aren't just like 90% talking. And, that's where I feel like this kind of drops a bit. And in many ways, I feel like narratively, it just kind of feels like your run-of-the-mill science fiction series. Except, it has some elements which I'll get into with character-wise, but also, you have your MacGuffins, you have what you're trying to get. You're trying to get to the Halo. And I don't feel like I really had a connection to exactly what that is and like why this is that important. And I feel like that's one of the things too where it just feels like a bunch of generic MacGuffins that we're chasing after too. There are the elements of the story focusing on like tyrannical rule and who do we trust, and there's double crosses everywhere, and who's a bad person, who's a spy, who's in bed with this group or whatever the hell, and there's a lot of twists and turns. There's a lot. Doesn't mean they're all effective, but there's a lot of them. And I do feel like there's whole entire subplots that could have easily been trimmed from this, and I felt like they really stretched this out as like trying to set up an origin season focusing on how, Master Chief becomes Master Chief. And I think Pablo Schreiber does a really fine job as Master Chief, except, you barely see him fully in the Master Chief like the armor or anything. It's just like, did they really just Judge Dredd this? Like 90s Judge Dredd this? I'm like, yep, they certainly did. And, you have the origins of Cortana, which Jen Taylor, I think, does a fine job. You have Natascha McElhone, who does a really fine job in this as, like, the scientist involved. And you have people like Bokeem Woodbine, who pops up, and how significant their role is, I don't know. You just have all these other elemental threads thrown in here that just don't feel like they needed to be there, and you could have just focused on the main story, and this probably could have been like a good 5-6 episodes, a little sleeker, a little less giant gaps without any kind of action or thrills. And like, not everything needs action or thrills, but like, when it's the strongest part of your show, you should probably lean in on it. And this certainly does not. I feel like they just stretch this so thin. And, you know, I think the interesting dynamics between Cortana and Master Chief, those are some interesting parts of the series and where that's going. But in the end, I feel like this feels a little too generic, but I did dig the action a lot, and I think Pablo Schreiber was a fine choice as Master Chief, and like, there's elements of the story that I thought were cool or interesting, despite the fact that most of them were just cliche or derivative of other science fiction. But those are my thoughts on Season 1 of Halo. Let me know what you think. Let's talk some TV. But thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.